Coogs House, I'm kind of determined that maybe next year we just have super secret football scrimmages instead of bye weeks because something's got to change on that.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Angel. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater can't step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your, at this point, might be last listen of the day, or maybe first listen of Saturday. I guess it's the wee hours of Saturday morning. I'd usually have some witty, clever question to get to, but between it being late and me being tired of watching bad football, tell me in the comments down below what you thought watching that, whatever that was. I want to talk about a couple different things in this game. I want to try and be optimistic by the end about what, like, the season is not over. There are two more games, and technically if you win both, you still get to go to a bowl game and all of that. I'll talk some about the offense and like where to put blame on things and things like that. Because weirdly, this was a monstrously bad game. That's not even a word. A monstrously bad game. But it also had like fairly big plays in it. But first, let's just breathe and react to Houston dropping a game 27-3 to a team that lost 5 in a row. This is the second bye week for Houston this season, in which they came out and played a team that had lost 5 in a row, both times, ironically. Came out and played a team that had lost 5 in a row, and they laid eggs in both of them. Both of those teams, for what it's worth, Kansas and now Arizona, were projected to do really well before the season started and having fairly disappointing seasons. They spent their bye weeks before Houston getting right, and Houston spent theirs getting left. I don't know, something different than right. And it was interesting to look at this game from like this was a big week for Houston perspective. Football was, 3 games left, need 2 wins, get to bowl eligibility. Bowl eligibility in Fritz's first season would be huge. They've already exceeded expectations in a lot of ways, which some people were arguing with me about online, I guess. One of the reasons, I guess, maybe I need to go from Twitter or something else, but they've already exceeded expectations from the national perspective. And frankly, making a bowl would only increase, the success of the season that was. This thing is a 3-year rebuild, and we're part of the way through, I think, year 1. I'm hoping not year 0. And as we look at this, they had played well and kind of figured out some things about themselves against a good Kansas State team. They figured out some things about themselves against a Utah team that, for as bad as their record shows, has talented football players on it. I mean, they returned a lot of a top caliber defense from a year ago. They did well against TCU on the road. So they thought they could do the road game thing a little bit. I would argue that's a more hostile environment, given some like the in-state rivalry aspect of it. Instead, you dropped a big dookie in Arizona, and I think the big question is asking about. As TI7791 says, who's a frequent listener of the live post-game shows here, how can anyone be this unprepared coming off of a bye, make it make sense? I can't make it make sense, unfortunately, but I will say that it seems consistent. And that's a little bit alarming because you had like the 2 bye weeks, right? Both Kansas and this, in which Houston lost a combined, 69-17 in the 2 games put together against 2 teams that had lost 10 games straight coming into the Houston game put together. You also looked woefully unprepared for the first 3 quarters, really for on the offense for the entire game against UNLV, and then defensively, I guess you put together a decent second half, and that's to start the season, right? It's like without the rhythm of a game week, this team has problems getting prepared for, in this case, a Friday night, but really just for game day, and it's interesting because theoretically you'd anticipate that means you're better on the games or whatever, but this is the 1, 2, 3, 4 if you count UNLV, because the touchdown comes at the very end in garbage time. But anyway, this is just another game where Houston goes without a touchdown. They were held scoreless against both Cincinnati and Iowa State, and they only get a field goal in this one. That's bad offense. And admittedly, it's interesting to call that bad offense when Houston did not that yards count. Yards don't count for points. I don't mean to make them out to be bigger than they are. But Houston had 326 yards of offense and just 3 points. And so weirdly, that to me strikes more of a chord with like execution and beating yourself. Houston committed 4 penalties that I guess technically added up to 39 yards, but they were frequently like a 10-yard holding penalty on a 20-yard run, right? That really feels more like 30 when you're talking about the impact of the game, right? Or the holding penalty on the punt return that I believe was a touchdown, right? The holding penalty on that is technically a 10-yard holding penalty. However, it negated a touchdown and a lot of yardage, if not a touchdown, right? I think it would have been a touchdown, but either way, right? Those kinds of things really do add up in a weird way. Then you add in that Houston turned it over 3 times legitimately in terms of 2 fumbles and interception. And you also then had, I believe it was 4 fourth down turnovers and turnover on downs. Just abysmal. Just abysmal. I want to talk about the offense and other things to blame in a second. So I'm going to try and keep my thoughts on things like running the ball on 3rd and 8 and things like that for later. But on the whole, this team did not look prepared for Arizona. Now, I'm not sitting here watching Willie Fritz speak. It's already almost 1 a.m. I've got a full day of coaching tomorrow and things like that. And I also, frankly, am as frustrated as anybody else. But I'm imagining what you're going to hear out of Fritz is a lot of ownership of it because he's done a pretty consistent job of owning those kinds of things. And for what it's worth, not that I should give too much credit, whatever, but like they have come out and played some pretty good football as of late. They did win 3 out of 4 coming into this game. Baylor is far from the best team they've played this year going into next week and things like that. So I'm sure that those things will all get mixed around and changed and fixed and whatever. The shame is that in the landscape of the season, they kind of needed this one. And we talked coming into the season about how this stretch between Iowa State, TCU, at Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, and at Arizona was going to be a challenging one, right? And I guess if you'd have told me in July they were going to go through that 6-game stretch 3-3, I probably would have been ecstatic, right? I mean, that's 3 Big 12 wins right there. However, as we kind of look back at it now, it feels really crappy because 2 of those losses were to teams in Kansas and Arizona now that have been having extremely disappointing seasons, that other teams have found ways to win and win decisively against. And frankly, even with the way Houston wants to score and run the football, we just saw UCF run the ball all over Arizona 2 weeks ago. And so while I don't think statistically that the worst running defense in the Big 12, they definitely looked like it 2 weeks ago when you were kind of hoping you could replicate that. Now, I don't mean to say that Arizona doesn't practice too. They needed this. They got to win all 3 of their final games to be bowl eligible, and they had the much more disappoint. Whereas Houston's kind of actually exceeding expectations this season. Arizona's doing very much the opposite, right? And so they've got a lot. They were at home and all of that, right? But it did feel like a kind of game where Houston never got off the figurative bus. They couldn't get out of their own way. And they really lacked the sense of urgency about this game. And I think that showed up in execution across a lot of ways. Will here says that the 2 penalties and the failed conversion, completed pass and the fake punt, I think he's talking about, kneecapped the little momentum we got. I will say that the penalty, it felt like we finally bust out of our figurative box when Mekhi Muse had the would have been punt return touchdown. That got called back. The Boogie Johnson 4th down fake punt that should have been a catch got ruled incomplete, and then review said it stands, which for folks that are new to this or whatever means that they couldn't decisively change it from what was on the field, meaning whatever they'd called on the field would have been the way it goes. That obviously hurt a lot. Really, really painful one. I have to watch this thing again on Sunday at some point to talk about it for Monday, and that already hurts me. But before we get to that, we'll talk about the part that hurts the most in a second, and that is the offense, because this is yet another game without a touchdown for the Houston Cougars. Before we get to that, when I'm feeling crappy, I want to eat a steak. And you might want to eat steak too. And right now, our buddies over at Omaha Steaks have got some fun for you. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled and quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, you can skip the holiday hustle and bustle with save 50% off of gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, you get a $30 reward card when you shop early. Score an extra $30 off promo code COLLEGE. 5 generations of experience, and they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience. And the gifting experts of Omaha Steaks make it easy to deliver the perfect gift with their thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. Great for Christmas or whatever holidays you're doing soon. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, listeners get extra $30 off promo code COLLEGE. $30 off promo code $30 off steak promo code COLLEGE, and $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at Omaha Steaks, OMAHA steaks.com. And an extra $30 off promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchases may apply. Parker Ainsworth, host of Locked on Coogs, are coming out trying to make sense of what just happened. And it's interesting because I'm going to spend this segment, I think, bashing on the offense. I do that about once a week, it feels like, with football these days. With basketball going on, it's been a little thrown off, but, as it goes. But I will say that it's odd to talk about an offense that had 326 yards, that in terms of running the ball had 4 yards per rush. It's hard to think of that as like a game where we're going to sit here and talk about how bad the offense was, but the offense was unquestionably the bad part of this football game. Now, I don't mean to say the defense played phenomenally. They gave up 27 points to a team that was averaging closer to 20. For what it's worth, I think Arizona had a okay running back and a all-pro receiver kind of guy, and Tatoria McMillan and I just can't believe that was enough to throw us for a tizzy. It looked like they didn't know where McMillan was half the time, which was baffling. Again, the guy's a first-round draft pick potentially. I can't believe that they didn't have eyes on him. It felt like at all times. Frankly, I'd want 4 or 6 or 8 eyes on him at all times. It's that kind of good, and he showed it. He played very well. But Houston's offense puts up 326 yards and gets just 3 points. That's more than 100 yards per point. Per point. That's really bad. And the deal here is obviously the turnovers, 2 fumbles and a pick. The fourth down conversions that don't go, right? And it really comes down to me, that there were moments where Houston had big plays that didn't amount to much. Jalen Crest had a big 20-yard run, and immediately after that, Rashawn Sanford has a 38-yard run. They get down to the 2, and they can't punch it in, right? You have the Manjack catch, 57 yards. It's at the end of the game in garbage time feeling kind of thing, but still 57 yards. And, didn't dig anything out of it. Right now, it was late in the game. It probably wouldn't amount to anything anyway. But you had Boogie Johnson had a big 22-yard catch. That was one of his crossers over the middle. He had, for what it's worth, we're talking about how badly people played. My locked-on player of the game, I believe, is going to be Boogie Johnson. He got credited for 4 catches and 70 yards, and we all know that, that he got kind of screwed on a fake punt one. So he's just played as well as anyone did in this game. I think it's kind of hard to argue otherwise. Anyway, but Jamarian Burnett having a couple fumbles early. The one fumble, I guess, technically would have been a turnover on downs had he not fumbled, but I don't. Anyway, the scoring of that's kind of irrelevant. It was not good. And that's how you shot yourself in the foot. And it's interesting because a lot of people get on Barbay, the offensive coordinator, for a lot of reasons. And he is proven to be far from perfect. And I think I've been critical on certain things and, slow to be critical on other things with him. I think some people, and I'll probably say this a lot, I think some people would rather lose looking like the Mike Leach Texas Tech Red Raiders where you score 60 points a game than win looking Iowa last year where you score 7 or 10, right? I think there's just some people out there that would rather score a lot of points, have a high-flying offense, even if it meant you lose, right? And I don't know that I necessarily agree with all of that. So I think there's some people that just get upset about the fact that Houston is running the ball as often as they are. 34 rushes is just not what some people want. And aesthetically, just some people want something different. And to that, I kind of want to just say tough. But in terms of this game, where I get critical of Barbay is that it's November 16th. I guess they kicked off the game on November 15th, actually, but it's November, mid-November. And this is the execution, right? Like, execution is a very player-driven thing, but that continues to like slide. The spectrum kind of shifts more and more to the coaches as the year goes on, right? If we're having trouble holding on to the football, Jermaine Burnett, at this point in the year, that's either a coaching decision to have him in or a coaching decision as to why isn't he working, like why hasn't he gotten better at that, right? If we're having trouble with edge pressure at the tackle spot, that's either a coaching decision as to why we're putting them in positions to be giving up pressures there, or it's a coaching decision as to why hasn't that guy gotten better, right? Like those things I think are where I get more critical on this. It's not necessarily a scheme thing in any area but one. And I want to talk about that in a second. I generally think that you can win games, especially in modern college football, where guys are going to smaller boxes and lighter defenses and stuff like that to stop the spread. You can kind of zig where others zag and run the ball and be strong, effective, etc. Right? That's I think what Houston would like to do. However, the one area that I do think comes down to play calling, and I hesitate to do play calling a lot, especially because most TV cameras don't see the all 22 and all that, so you can't really see how some of the routes unfold always or whatever. This running the ball on 3rd and 5 or more has got to stop. It just doesn't. It doesn't amount to much. Frankly, it's become such a trend for Houston that other teams see it. And I understand the old saying, and I think I upset one listener, I can't remember who it was, that commented that they hate when I say that, when you pass the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. It's the old football coach adage. It's not one that I actually abide by myself when I was coaching football, but it's the old football adage, right? Houston has chosen to, on 3rd and 8, 12, etc., run the football. And if they get a decent chunk, they might go for it on 4th down, right? That's kind of the thought process looks like they've had. And then they get stuffed on 3rd and 12 with a run play. They punt it away. They're not good at 3rd down conversions in general. So I don't mean this to excuse other 3rd down woes, right? I think, let me pull up the number here. It looks like they were officially 2 of 13 on 3rd downs, right? Of those 13 3rd downs and my charting here, I had 7 of them as being 3rd down and 4 or more yards. Now, in football, you think of 4 yards, 4 or more yards as a passing down typically. So running the ball in that situation would be odd. Okay. In 3rd down of 4 or more, okay, they had 7 of those. They only converted 1, and it was through the air, but they ran it 4 times, right? Those numbers aren't good, and I'll restat it as I go through on Sunday for my second watch. I do it in an abbreviated way where I fast forward through the parts that the kick commercials, the in between plays. I don't need to see personnel subbing in and out. Right, we've seen the game happen once, but that's bad numbers. That's bad, and frankly, that also means that you were 1 of 3 throwing the ball on 3rd and 4 or more. That's a 33% chance. That's better than your 2 of 13 overall on 3rd down of any type of 3rd down, right? And it kind of makes you question, like, well, then why aren't they throwing it on 3rd and 4 or more often? Especially, and this is a more like logistical argument, you've got some really talented wide receivers, really, really talented wide receivers. And I understand that they were recruited to play in one offense, and now they're here, and Houston's running a little bit different things, so it's kind of an ill-fit thing. And truthfully, you could argue that about a bunch of positions on the offensive side of this roster, right? Your offensive linemen were brought into pass block, and now they're being asked to run block. Those are different types of athletes, right? You got Sanford and Snead are really more kind of guys that catch the ball out of the backfield, now asking them to run up the gut behind a folding center, right? Those kinds of things are a little bit different. But I also think that when you look at the numbers, they continue to lay out that Houston running the ball on 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 12 is ineffective. And I hadn't even counted the times that the pass play they run is an ineffective screen, right? Generally speaking, when it's 3rd and 4 or more, they're not pushing the ball down the field. And that is not working, to put it nicely. I'm going to keep talking this game. We'll see if I ever get around to the positive stuff or not. It's also 1:08 presently, so we'll see how much longer we go here. Before we get too far, I do want to talk to you about our buddies over at FanDuel. Now, they had this game with Houston as a 1.5-point dog by the time things closed on Friday. I told you all week I'd have taken that one, and I hope none of you listened to me on that, at least. Anyway, during the NFL season, if you're trying to get back in on the action with the Texans or something like that, you put down $5, you get $150 back at bonus bets at FanDuel.com. All the $5 bet has to do is win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need in one place. They can give you live stats and play-by-play of all the NFL games. So much more when you go to the same app with all the stuff in one spot. Visit FanDuel.com, join today. You get $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Nope. Wrong clip there. That's just how late we're doing this thing. Park Rangers are locked on Coogs here, breaking down Houston's loss to Arizona 27-3. Pretty embarrassing as Houston falls to 4-6, 3-4 in the conference. Had a shot to get to 500 and above 500 in conference play. Ultimately squandered that on down the backside of their leg. I did at some point want to talk to them about how this does not mean this guy has to fall on the season by any stretch. But the offense here really worries me. And I understand, and I am totally for, I'm not against an offense that runs the football first. I think there's a lot of bad faith arguments that are really being made just on the results of people arguing against some sort of a run first offense. Because when you look across the top 25, there are plenty of teams having very successful years running the football more than they pass it. There just are. It's no longer 2011, right? That's just not where football is anymore. However, things like ball security, things like when they call shot plays, things like going shotgun with a 6'5", 245-pound quarterback at the 1.5 yard line, those things drive me a little crazy. And so when I talk about, first of all, I should say Donovan is a very nice person. He's been nothing but kind to me. And frankly, I really wanted him to make the big step this year forward, right? I knew he had growth to do and all that, and he didn't do it. I really wanted him to. Instead, he's been a great team leader and captain from the sidelines. He also serves a very clear role. They call him to come in for, 3rd and short, 4th and short, and just go forward, lean forward, right? When they bring him into the football game, the other team knows it's a QB sneak, right? And I don't mean that because we're not being intelligent. He's the guy that should come in and run QB sneak. But it also means that they can scout. They practice too, right? They scout that. They see that. Running him in a QB sneak from the shotgun both takes away from his tools, what he does best. And for what it's worth, when you're playing a team that has very big defensive linemen, while they had trouble stopping the run against UCF a couple weeks ago, they are very big up front. You suddenly have all kinds of problems in getting across the first down marker, end zone, whatever. And you're being predictable in a way that if everyone in the stadium knows you're gonna run the football, just line up under center. You can still, if you wanted to, run some sort of a play action pop pass, kind of a tricky thing if that was in your repertoire. But what they did instead was kind of waste a down inside the 2 yard line. And then on the following play, they tried to get tricky and run a flood concept that, for what it's worth, did hit Jay York in the hands. And probably, it would have been a tough catch, but it probably could have been caught, right? It wasn't. Houston didn't score because they didn't score a touchdown in this game. Anyway, frustrated by that in a big way. We talked about it all last year. Why aren't we tush pushing with this quarterback? Now he's not the starter. So if you take a bad hit to the shoulder and take a little bit of a stinger, you're okay. He's not your starter. I don't get it. I don't know that I ever will. Now, I'm going to rewatch this game on Sunday, and we'll break more down for Monday's show. So, second watch always has a little bit, it's never as negative, never as positive. We'll talk about goats and those kinds of things. But I am trying to remind myself the sky is not falling. Houston sits at 4-6 with 2 games left, which means that they can get to 6-6 and can get into a bowl. They have a very winnable game against Baylor as their final home game of the season next Saturday. It's the blowout game. Wear your blue. Here's actually a blue shirt of mine folded up with the laundry. Not very well. Wear your blue. Go Coogs and all that. But that's going to be an important game. Houston is trying to make it to bowl eligible, trying to win their final home game in front of the fans. Baylor, as you look at it, is 5-4. I guess they technically, I believe they also play tomorrow, so maybe they won't need it for bowl eligibility necessarily. Yeah, they play tomorrow, West Virginia. West Virginia's actually kind of turned around. It's rolling a little bit. Anyway, that game's important to both teams. Houston can pull that off and then go play spoiler against BYU because it feels like the Big 12 is having the kind of year where, of course, Houston's going to go play spoiler against BYU because just something weird seems to happen every weekend. And even if they give valiant efforts and do not beat Baylor and BYU, I think they beat Baylor, but that I also thought they were going to beat Arizona. If they give valiant efforts and don't beat either team, this is already a team that showed marked improvement from a year ago. With a much more challenging schedule, they already have as many wins. They already have more conference wins. They lost a lot of talent when the coaching change happened. They had to replace that in a big way. It's a team that's already shown improvement. So while these baffling games coming out of bye weeks are painful, and while I don't have a good explanation for it, outside of something about the bye week practice routine needs to change, and needs to have more focus on getting ready for the opponent or something. A lot of teams, I should say, a lot of schools, a lot of programs will, on a bye week, take time to practice against yourself, right? Let's just get better at fundamentals for the first week or something. And that's not a horrible plan. But when you lay eggs in both games following bye weeks of the season, you got to kind of look at mirror and adjust a little bit, I think. Anyway, there's a chance that the season ends up on an even higher note in a bowl and all that. There's a chance this season does not. It's still been a wildly successful season compared to expectations. You've already surpassed your win-loss total on all major gambling books going into the season. You're already pretty secure in that you're not going. It'd be, at this point, a shocker if you finished 15th in the conference, which was your preseason ranking. You've got some talented guys that, frankly, I feel like are going to turn themselves into NFL guys. Keith Cooper, AJ Halsey, is an old school safety, but I think there's a spot for him. I think those guys are turning into that, right? You've got a lot of things going about this team that in July, it felt like, oh man, how are we going to survive this season, right? Look, I get that losing games are not fun, and that was hard to watch because it was not very well played football. Point blank, right? You gave up 27 points to a team that was averaging close to 20. You didn't score a touchdown. Your one big special teams play, I guess 2. One of them got called back on a holding penalty, and the other one got usurped just 2 plays later, or just a few plays later, by a kick that was 13 yards longer, right? Just a bad day at the office, and we're gonna watch it again on Sunday. I had to coach all day tomorrow, so it kind of worked out. This was Friday night. We're going to give it another go on Sunday and see with the result in hand what we can see leading up to it. But it just felt like there's a weird energy and vibe in this one from the very first offensive, I'll say. The first defensive possession actually was strong, but the first offensive possession. And so that's a little awkward. But we'll talk about it Monday, Tuesday. We'll get into Baylor stuff throughout the week. We got basketballs coming up as well. Next week they have one game Friday night against Hofstra, but you're getting ready for the NIL Players Invitational the next week. And so more on all that. Recruiting news, too, was a big week this past week in basketball recruiting. Hopefully we get a big week soon in football recruiting. And frankly, Basketball recruiting is far from over. Fairly large senior class. We'll see how things go with the rest of that. Whatever's going on, Locked on Cougs is going to be here to cover it, good, bad, and the ugly. And this one was ugly. Locked on Cougs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, even the hard ones. Go Cougs.